Welcome, Kennesaw Happenings podcast. I'm Podcast Pete, and in the studio from a little bit of ways, traveling in the early morning traffic, is Cindy. So, Cindy, tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I am an occupational therapist, and I have been for the past 30 years. I've worked in a variety of settings, always with the older adult population. So, home health, acute care, inpatient rehab, subacute rehab, outpatient. In my 30 years, ton of experience working with the older adult population. Over the past year, really over the past 5 or 6 years, I became also an aging in place specialist and started doing home safety assessments for aging in place, fall prevention, maximizing function in a person's home. I was working with EnABLE Home Solutions, and the owner at the time decided to retire, and then it became my business.
Awesome. I love that. Now, we were talking before we went on the air, and I wanted to caution you because you were giving me gold nuggets after gold nuggets. I said, save them. So let's give our viewers, I love what you're doing. And so tell us, from an OT to what you're doing now. What was the thought there? You had spent all these years in OT. Now you're going to go aging in place. What was that thought?
Sure. So occupational therapy in general really works on the rehab team. So with physical therapists, speech therapists, recreational therapists, trying to work with people on maximizing function. So OT specifically help people in their activities of daily living, in getting to the bathroom safely and working with and being able to do those things we take for granted until they're difficult to do. And so we work with people on trying to maximize function. Working with the older adult population for as long as I have, you realize that part of the hindrance with function as we age, whether it be with a diagnosis or just in the aging process, the environment makes a huge benefit or problem when it comes to helping people live and function as they want, as they age, or as they're dealing with a specific diagnosis. So you realize that the environment is a key part in how you can function. Sometimes it can help, sometimes it can hinder. And you realize that in the 30 years I worked with people, a lot of what we do as OTs is not only help people improve function by working on exercise and movement, but we also do activity modification. And that's a huge part of OT. We look at how a person does something and how the environment is, and then make recommendations to help maximize function, even if it's in modifying the environment versus somebody changing the way they're doing something. So it was a natural progression to working in people's homes to help them figure out how to improve and modify their space so it helps versus hinders their process. Fall prevention is huge. 1 in 4 people over the age of 65 have a fall every year, according to the CDC. And about $500 billion a year is spent, Medicare funds is spent on the medical costs of falls. And that's non-fatal falls. So $500 billion a year. And that does not include the cost of what it takes for somebody to then have care after they leave the hospital. Doesn't pay for the daughter who has to be off work. It doesn't cover the caregivers that have to now come into the home to help someone after a fall. So that's just the medical cost alone. So I think it's important for everyone in all different areas to really think about preventing falls.
That is so crucial because we were talking before about how long do you prepare for a move or just the aging in place parent that all of a sudden the house was set up for 30 years ago. Now it has to be modified because their ability to get around is totally different. I don't usually do this, but I'm intrigued by your topic and your industry. We usually talk about you. If you don't mind, let's go deep.
Sure.
Let's go into your business
Yeah,
because it's
of course.
fascinating. Okay, so I want you to think 3 things that you always see as, I mean, there's 20 things out
Yeah.
there, but 3 things that keep coming up over and over and over again. We talked about threshold. Just share with our viewers, if you're speaking to the kids of the parents, what 3 things, if you had to say, these are things I see all the time, what would they be?
Yeah. So so when I go into a home, I look at all areas, but the main ones, the ones that tend to have the most red flags or the most difficulty for people is home entry exit. So how somebody is safely getting out of their home and the problem solving to figure out what can be done with the space that's allotted, how many steps to enter. There are some very simple things that you can do to really improve the safety. Sometimes it is the simple of just adding a little hand assist bar in the frame of the doorway as they do their one-step entry into the home. So home entry exit, and how difficult that can be, and sometimes unsafe if it's old steps that maybe just need to be redone, or just adding a handrail. So lots of things that can be done there, but that would be number one, home entry exit. Bathroom safety. We all could probably assume that one, but the ability to get in and out of the bathroom with whatever assistive device that's needed, or even if there isn't an assistive device. So doorways, there are simple ways of changing that without having to do a renovation. Toilet height, but height is not always an issue if you're not a tall person. So not everyone needs a raised toilet seat. I go into lots of homes and there's, oh, well, I have a raised toilet seat, and the person is 5'2", and they don't really need a raised toilet seat.
Right.
They probably just need a grab bar or some way of adding arms to the toilet to help sit and stand from the toilet. And then shower and tub safety. So and knowing that there are really a lot of different ways. You don't have to renovate all the time. I mean, sometimes it's a good thing and you may want to, but you do not have to. There's lots of ways of modifying the shower to make it safer. So those are the 3 areas. And then I would add bed mobility, getting in and out of bed. I hear lots of people say, well, mom hasn't fallen, but she's just slid off the side of the bed. So in the medical and therapy world, we do consider that a fall. And that's a huge issue. Sometimes it's just bed height for somebody who's petite, bed's too high, can't touch the floor, and now you're sliding off the edge. So I look at nighttime voiding, how make that safe, in and out of bed. And there are also ways to lower a bed without having to change the frame. So yeah, those are probably the
that last one you said. There's a resident that lives here, and so I see her because I walk right by her room to go to the breakfast area, and so she has a hat on, and she said, I don't know how the conversation came up, but she fell out, hit the nightstand, 10 stitches on her head, and so she had never done that before. But here's a nightstand right by her bed. With it obviously sharp edge, and you don't think of the falls coming from the bed, but here she was describing the situation to me, and it's real easy because I do the same thing. Is like, then you move a certain way, before you know it, you're out of the bed, and if you haven't properly set that room up, like my first instinct, and of course I'm not in your business, but is to remove that nightstand. to the
Mhm.
point that it's not close enough where if you do fall out
Mhm.
again, it's
Mhm.
not a factor. But you don't know these things. It's almost like you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Well, what would you say? I like all three of them because my mom has the metal
Mhm.
handle coming into out of the garage,
Yeah.
has the shower, same thing.
Mhm.
So all these things have been adapted, and it was a 55 and older home, one
Mhm.
story and all that. But all these things had to be changed as she got older.
Mhm.
And we had a person that talked about, she does exercise here, and we talk about opening up your body and the shuffle that
Mhm.
comes, and the
Mhm.
shuffle.
Mhm.
If you're not strong enough and your muscles aren't able to handle, then all of a sudden you hit a spot and then you're on the floor.
Mhm.
And so I never realized it because I see a gentleman walking to get his paper, and he has a cane and he has a shuffle. It's like over time your muscles atrophy, and all of a sudden, you don't have that mobility. What do you see? Like, how do you handle when you're working with your clients and you're kind of seeing some things physically? Are you making recommendations to the kids about things that would help that parent?
Yes, absolutely. So in each situation is a little bit different. So why the shuffle is there? Is it weakness? Is it Parkinson's disease? Is it the wrong shoes? So I do make recommendations as
Mm-hmm.
far as the shoes. I had a client one time who lived in an independent living facility, but she was tripping and falling on the tile floors in the lobby area pretty frequently. So
Mm-hmm.
in assessing her mobility in that area and with the shoes, I actually realized it was the shoes that were too much rubber. So her toes just kept tripping because she was shuffling. We may not be able to change the
Mm-hmm.
shuffle, although we worked on that a little bit. But when somebody's tired, they may go back to that shuffling gait. So we actually just changed her shoes instead and
Mm-hmm.
made it to where if she did shuffle, she wouldn't trip over her toes. But we also look at the flooring and say, do we need to remove a throw rug? Area rugs
Mm-hmm.
sometimes can be taped around the edges. But throw rugs are often more slippery and very easily tripped over, especially if there's a shuffling gait. The correct assistive device can also make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I will make recommendations based on what can fit in their home and what fits in their environment, and also talk about the benefits of different assistive devices and the proper way to use them. We see a lot, as I'm sure many have seen, when a walker or a rollator with the four wheels on the seat
Mm-hmm.
being used, but people are leaning into them and kind of pushing them away. So then they looks like it's the rollator's fault.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't want to use that rollator, but it's actually more on the technique and how it's being used is more the issue. So we go over that a lot. And if there really are issues and people haven't seen physical therapy in a while, or are really maybe due based on diagnosis or based
Mm-hmm.
on that they really have some significant weakness. So I recommend out to physical therapists a lot to really work on these areas more
Mm-hmm.
regularly.
That makes sense. So I'm just thinking, right, as you're explaining that.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom had fallen,
Mm-hmm.
and so she has a rollator now, and so that's helping. And in the bathroom, she has two sinks, one behind her, one's in front of her. But my sister said she wants to use the one behind her.
Mm-hmm.
She's kind of gotten used to that sink, and so you're trying to move around in a bathroom
Uh-huh.
because you always, we're creatures of habit no matter what. So you always have to evaluate how they're moving,
Yes.
what they're used to,
Mm-hmm.
because it took us quite a few years to get her to get an iPhone.
Mhm.
And my sister kept talking to her about how simple it was to use, but it was like, I don't want to
That's
learn it. You know,
hard.
yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's fine. You
Oh,
know,
that's good.
we were
Sure.
able to
Mhm.
communicate with her, but it's funny how you're explaining things, and it's like front and center of all that is so crucial. And
Mhm.
I'm really fascinated by the fall.
Yeah.
So, and how do you educate the kids?
Mm.
Like, what you obviously have to have them on board, understanding their parents and the way things are going, because you see the same things over and over again.
Mhm.
So what's it look like when you go to a home and you're talking with the family?
Mhm. So, and it depends on each situation. Sometimes it's the child that has called me to ask me to come in a pretty often couple different scenarios where the child will call is, we want mom and dad to move, whether it be from their current 55 and older condo because they don't think it's right for them, or their home, and the parent is refusing to move. Then I am the compromise. Okay, if
Okay.
you're unwilling to move, then I need you to have someone come in and try to make the space safer for you.
Mhm.
So I end up being the compromise. In those situations, everyone's pretty open to the recommendations that I'm making, because this is allowing them to stay in their home versus moving if they don't want to move yet.
Mhm.
So in that case, if the child is there, I educate everyone at the same time. I talk about what they may be seeing, and then how we can help that, and how we can change the environment, or help in getting someone to come in, as far as maybe someone to help declutter an area,
Mhm.
which can definitely be a fall hazard. So in that way, everyone's kind of open, and I educate everyone at the same time. Sometimes I'll see the homeowner on their own. The daughter or the son has called me to set it up.
Mhm.
I go home and write out everything that I have educated. So that way the client doesn't have to sit there and remember or take notes themselves.
Gotcha.
I take the notes, I take the pictures, and then go home and write it all out in a report. I don't sell equipment, so I'm not pushing products.
Mhm.
So I provide live links in that report to then, for the child, for the homeowner,
Mhm.
to then go back and purchase the items that they want to move forward with. So sometimes it's, well, I'm willing to change this, I don't want to change this yet.
Right.
But then they have the information in the report.
Mhm.
The child can go back and say, Mom, are we ready to maybe move forward on these options? And then I can also help a handyman come in and get that set up as well, to make those, add the grab bars, or whatever it may be. So I do a lot of talking.
Yeah, that's and educating,
And educating,
because
I do.
my brain just goes. Like, I consider like a strategic thinking person. I always I probably would have been okay as an engineer, because everything I see, my brain solves. It's like, so I'm seeing you describe this. It's like crazy good,
Yeah.
because you're given a strategic plan for the parent or for the person aging in place,
Yes.
and at each step, you're right. It may not be, able to do this, but this, and then there's an evolving process that you're going through. Is like, I love how you said, okay, Mom, are you ready to look at this area? Because you can't make too many changes too quick.
Correct.
Do you see that, like,
Absolutely.
the parent, I mean, the kids went, okay, Mom, we're going to change all this. And it's like, whoa.
Right. No, this is a person's home.
Yeah.
It's often somewhere they've lived for 30, 40 years. And the understanding that our bodies are changing, let alone if there's a diagnosis. But if it's really just the aging process, that's hard to come to terms with sometimes. And so, yes, it is a process. And I usually have a pretty gentle way of talking about just the benefits of if somebody really wants to stay in their home, then the minute people start falling regularly or having that really major fall, that's when children and medical professionals get very concerned about people staying in their home. So really trying to decrease those fall risks can help you stay in your home for longer. So I really, focus on that and be gentle about it. And then if there is a diagnosis, so let's say it's a diagnosis of Parkinson's that we know is progressive, some things, and that's why the benefit of the report as well, because some things you need right now and some things you can go back to as the disease progresses.
Gotcha.
And so I put all of that also in the information. So I'll say, this is great now, but when you have these symptoms, we may need to move to this. So let's say it's a grab bar at the threshold right now to get into from the garage. It may need to be a ramp later. So then I'll tell them how long that ramp should be and how they can purchase that. So that way they'll have the next step.
Yeah. I mean, this is like, I'm getting a master class on strategy in business and through aging in place. It's like, I never really kind of, until recently, like real recent, understood that concept, because we had a guest on and he said aging in place. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I mean, I've heard it, but not like you have described it, that is a process of really laying out that plan for the aging parent that they can be safe. I mean, $500 billion, that's mind-boggling. When
crazy.
You think about the amount of money that's spent, and that the prevention part is not even close to that. It's probably a speck on that number. And so why don't we talk real briefly, because we want to keep, we want to respect your time. I could talk the rest of the day on this subject, but I know you have to go over to Dunwoody, as you said.
I'm driving to Dunwoody.
Yeah. So you had said that you do talks. And so how can people get a hold of you if they're like out there going, man, we need somebody to come in here and educate us and do a talk to our organization? How would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I do lots of just general fall prevention talks. So I do feel that it's a service as being a healthcare professional for 30 years. That is something that I provide to support groups, to church groups, to, whenever somebody wants to be able to really start talking about ways that they can kind of do it yourself techniques to decrease fall risks. And this is, to me, one of the benefits. The whole aging in place concept, like you're talking about, is somewhat a new concept, although we've all been trying to do it for a long time. So there's the Certified Aging in Place Specialist, the CAP certification, which many of you may have heard about. What all the things I'm talking about is the benefit of having an OT as a CAP certified, because we have that extra, we can assess the function and the mobility in the home that other people may not be able to. So having those eyes on to make those recommendations really helps. And then in the fall prevention talks that I do include that information on kind of the mobility aspect, and then what the problem solving. My dad's an engineer, so I think I got a little bit of that kind of problem solving.
You got that gene in you.
Gene. So so they can, my website, which
please give it, please.
So yes, it's EnABLEHomeSolutions.com. So EnABLEHomeSolutions.com is my website, and you can email me through there, and we can set up a time to talk, and I can come out and I have a PowerPoint, and we really go through. It's about 45 minutes to an hour talk about fall prevention and things you can do in your home.
Awesome. I love this. Okay. So you've given that information. What would be the one thing? So if we always like to ask our guests, like, if you can narrow it down to one thing, what would you want our viewers to go home with? What would be that one thing?
Falls are not a normal part of aging. So if falls are occurring, then we should be looking at why. Maybe it's a medical reason, or maybe it's an environmental reason, that something is causing that fall. Or so falls are not a normal part of aging. So we need to address the falls, and why those falls are occurring. That would be number one. Number two is planning ahead, which we talked about. Planning is a huge part of this process. Medicare does not, unfortunately, pay for the prevention part. So the more we can do to help prevent falls and the costs of falls and the after effects of falls, then I think the happier we can be and age the way we want.
Dang, I love it. I love it. So, okay. So we did do it we didn't even ask you anything on your story, because that's usually where we go.
Yeah.
But you hit a topic that was like needed, maybe in my mind, but
it's more interesting than
yeah,
me specifically.
Well,
so
I
it's
don't
okay.
know. I can't say that, but all I'm saying is it's needed out there.
Yes.
In such and education is everything. So, we don't know what we don't know. And so helping people see it from a different set of eyes is so powerful. So I want to thank you, Cindy, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I want our listeners, share this with people, share this with friends that have kids. This is the kind of thing you have to really be thinking of. It's not, you can't say, I know we're busy. We're very busy. But just share this so you can get Cindy and her help, to be able to do that prevention part. And you can certainly take a little bit of bite out of that 500 billion that's being spent. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Cindy.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.